Hi guys, today we discuss iconoclasm in the Quran. The verses or ayats which deal with idolatry and idolaters lie scattered in all chapters or surahs of the Quran. Taken together, they constitute the largest number, particularly in the Meccan surahs, as compared to those devoted to other subjects. Many a time, the verses occur in the stories of prophets who came before Muhammad, but it is more than obvious that they are addressed to the pagan contemporaries of the Prophet. We have collected and collated them under several sections as the theme develops stage by stage till it reaches its climax, that is, Allah's threat to destroy all peoples and human settlements where gods other than Him are honored. The other gods means idols. Most of the time, this is clear by the word sanam, which stands for carved statues, and wathan, which stands for simple stones, trimmed or untrimmed. Sometimes the other gods are the stars, the moon and the sun as well. Worship of these heavenly bodies was prevalent in pagan Arabia, but the description which we find most frequent in the Quran is partners ascribed to Allah. The technical term used for this ascription is shirk, which literally means mixing or associating. The idolaters are consequently called mushriks or mushrks, which term has acquired a terrible stink in Islamic parlance. Witnessing the tantrum which Allah throws constantly about partners ascribed to Him, we are left with a strong impression that the pagans had never neglected Allah. They only preferred to worship Him surrounded by His numerous companions who were His own aspects, names and forms of Allah. Surveying the scene in pagan Arabia, Allah of the Quran notices with great anger as well as anguish that though most of them worship Allah, they always ascribe partners to Him. What is worse, they worship female deities such as Al-Lat, Al-Manat and Al-Uzza, calling them daughters of Allah. They do not know that Allah never had a consort and therefore no sons or daughters. Here Sitaram Goel makes a side note. Some scholars say that Muhammad used the term partners because he was a businessman. This sounds to be true. Allah of the Quran does look like a racketeer out to consolidate a monopoly over worship which humans offer to the divine. A translator of the Quran observes in a footnote that these Arab goddesses were like Lakshmi and Saraswati of the Hindus. Quran Majid, translated into Hindi by Muhammad Farooq Khan, Rampur, UP 6, reprint 1976. Hindus can accept the observation as a compliment, though the translator frowns upon their goddesses as mere names without references to any existence. In any case, it establishes kinship between Hindus and the Arab pagans, the pre-Islamic Arabs. Hindu gods and goddesses have invited the same incentives and physical onslaughts from the Islamic invaders and their remnants as the Arab gods and goddesses did from the Prophet and his flock. Now we go back to discussing Allah. They do not know that Allah never had a consort and therefore no sons or daughters. They are also unfair to Allah when they burden Him with daughters, while they prefer sons for themselves. Allah informs the idolaters that these female deities are mere names invented by their forefathers and repeated by them, and that the worship of other divinities, male or female, has received no warrant, that is, no scriptural sanction. The idolaters are also accused of dividing their offerings between Allah and the partners ascribed to Him. But no offerings ever reach Allah because the partners grab His portion as well as their own, and their worship in the Kaaba is quote-unquote not but whistling and hand clapping. It seems that, like pagans everywhere and at all times, the pagans of Arabia also worship their gods with song and dance. Allah also complains that the pagans pray to Allah only when they are in trouble, but turn to other gods as soon as they are out of it. If asked why they do not worship Allah alone and always, they say that they follow the way of their forefathers. They do not know that their forefathers were unintelligent and received quote-unquote no guidance. They also forget that it is Allah who has created them and provides for them. On the contrary, they have invented lies in support of which they come out with no proof, and they persist in their error even when a book has been sent to them. They have chosen mere slaves as their protectors instead of the master, that is Allah, without realizing that slaves control nothing and can protect no one. Nor do they grasp the simple truth that if there were gods beside Allah, quote-unquote, both heaven and earth would have got disordered. The most unkindest cut of all, however, is that they invite Muhammad to disbelieve in Allah and turn to their gods. But Muhammad has not only no knowledge of their gods, he has also received proof to the contrary. It is the same proof which the earlier prophets had received. The idolaters thus compound their error by trying to drag Allah's prophet down to their own degenerate level. These are quotes from Allah of the Quran, like Jehovah of the Bible. Quran, okay, all the lines and paragraphs are given. Quran 12.106, 4.117, 6.101 and 2, 59.19 and 23, 6.137, 8.35. Lots of appendixes are given here. But Muhammad has not only no knowledge of their gods, he has also received proof to the contrary. It is the same proof which the earlier prophets had received. The idolaters thus compound their error by trying to drag Allah's prophet down to their own degenerate level. Turning to Muhammad, Allah issues a stern command, quote-unquote, "Say, O mankind, if you are in doubt without my religion, then know that I worship not what you worship instead of Allah, but I worship Allah, who causeth you to die, and I have been commanded to be of the believers. There is no compulsion in religion. The right direction is henceforth distinct from error, and he who rejects false deities and believes in Allah alone has grasped a firm handhold which will never break. Allah is hearer and knower." Coming to the other gods, the cause of the whole quarrel, Allah makes it clear, quite clear, that He Himself has not appointed them nor authorized their worship. The prophets and scriptures sent by Him earlier can be consulted on the subject. He challenges the idolaters to produce proof to the contrary if they have any. On the other hand, He has sent a scripture to Muhammad confirming the earlier prophets and prohibiting the pagan practices in very clear words. The other gods possess, quote-unquote, possess not an atom's weight either in heaven nor on earth, nor have they any share in it either. They do not, quote-unquote, own so much as the white spot on a date stone. Allah waxes eloquent about His own creation, which includes everything in the cosmos. The Quran is crowded with verses in which its author reveals in unbounded self-adultation. The exercise over, He challenges the idolaters to produce evidence that their gods have ever created anything. The truth, He says, is that they cannot create but are themselves created. They are dead, not living. If the idolaters want to know the worth of their gods, they should call them, those gods, and wait for an answer. They will wait in vain, for the gods have no ears with which they may hear, and no eyes with which they may see. Also, they have no feet with which they may walk, and no hands with which they may hold anything. They are helpless and dwell in darkness. Notice how this sounds like every argument you may have heard from an atheist, from a left-leaning atheist especially. And understand that how their thought processes and thinking about Hinduism has been colonized. Their mind has been colonized by Islamic invaders for generations, and that's how they come up with these arguments against Hinduism as well. Proof God is doing something. Like, if you are a believer in God, why is your leg broken? That kind of nonsense. Being deaf, dumb, blind, and without limbs, the other gods can neither help nor hurt. If a fly snatches away something from them, they do not have the strength to get it back. They are as frail and fragile as a spider's web. They cannot come to the rescue of those whom Allah wants to hurt. Those who hope to be helped by the other gods on the last day are in for a great disappointment. They, the gods, have not been given any power of intercession on anyone's behalf. They can lead the devotees only to doom because they are, quote-unquote, Satan's handiworks, like, quote-unquote, strong dirk and games of chance. Allah confides to Muhammad that He will set the devils to sow confusion in the camp of idolatry. The, quote-unquote, other gods will turn against their worshippers and vice versa. The doors of hell will be opened and the idolaters will be thrown into blazing fire. It is then that they, the idolaters, will admit that they were wrongdoers and bewail that their gods had failed them. They will wish to have another life on earth, so that they may be among the believers, but it will be too late. Quote-unquote, bound in chains, they will be dragged through boiling waters. No mediator will come forward to mediate for them. Next, Allah recites the record of earlier prophets and wise men vis-a-vis the idols and idolaters. We will relate it chronologically. Abraham chided his father Ezra and his people for being idolaters. He also rejected the worship of the stars, the moon and the sun, all of which he saw settling after rising. His people argued with him in favor of the ancestral way of worship. He asked them to produce scriptural proof in defense of their gods. At the same time, he sought forgiveness from Allah for his father. He harangued his father not to worship, quote-unquote, those who neither hear nor see nor are helpful in any way. His father rejected the advice and threatened to stone him. Abraham now decided to demonstrate the worthlessness of the other gods. He sneaked into a place of worship when his people were away and smashed all the idols to pieces except the biggest one among them. The people, when they came back and saw the scene, made enquiries. Some young men who had seen Abraham doing the deed reported the matter to them. So Abraham was questioned. He pointed an accusing finger at the big idol and said that the big one had smashed the smaller ones, and that the truth could be found out by questioning the pieces. His people said that idols were known not to speak. He shouted back, "Why then do you worship them? Fie on you and what you worship." They got angry and tried to burn him alive, but Allah cooled the fire and saved him. He told his people that it was not he but they and their gods who were fuel for hellfire, where they will be doomed and tormented forever. Then he separated himself from his people and proclaimed, quote-unquote, quoting Abraham now, "There has arisen between us and you hostility and hatred forever until you believe in Allah." The quote ends. Before he left, he informed his father, "I have sought forgiveness for you, though I know nothing for you from Allah." His devotion was rewarded by Allah with a son, Isaac, and a grandson, Jacob. Moses found his people adoring the golden calf soon after he brought them out of Egypt. He ordered them to slaughter with their own hands those among them who had gone astray. It was done. Moses also cursed Samiri, the man who had connived at the worship of the golden calf, so that Samiri became, quote-unquote, a leper in his life and fuel for hellfire in the next. Moses burnt the golden calf and, quote-unquote, scattered the ashes on the sea. Solomon was informed by his pet Hooper that the people of Sheba of the Bible, were ruled by a woman and worshipped the sun instead of Allah. He wrote to the Queen of Saba, demanding that she and her people should come to the true faith. The queen took fright and consulted her chieftains, who went in a delegation to Solomon with rich presents. The king spurned the presents and demanded that the queen be present in his court to settle the matter. The queen had no choice. She went to Jerusalem, saw Solomon's power, and accepted that there was no God beside Allah. Elijah warned his people not to worship Baal. They disregarded his advice and will face the doom on the day of judgment. Luqman advised his son not to be an idolater and to serve his parents, but if anyone's parents pressed their son to ascribe partners to Allah, they were to be disobeyed. Ties of faith stood above ties of kinship. Coming down the road of time, 7 young men in Palestine took refuge inside a cave and went to sleep when they saw their people degenerating into idolatry. They slept for 300 years and thought it only a day when they were awakened by Allah. One of them went out to find food and discovered that the Roman Empire was rid of idolatry and was worshipping Allah alone. The people in the town also learned about the true believers in the cave and hailed them as followers of Jesus Christ. A mosque was erected over their graves when the 7 faithful died after some time. Some of these stories are repeated several times and spread over several surahs. Allah tells them again and again for the benefit of the idolaters of Arabia. He exhorts them to follow the path of Abraham, Moses, Solomon, Elijah, Luqman, and the 7 young men, otherwise they were bound to become quote-unquote fuel for hellfire. Had there been any other gods, they themselves would have tried to quote-unquote reach the throne and usurp Allah's authority. There would have been disorder in heaven as well as on earth. If the idolaters fail to repent, Allah threatens to cast terror in their hearts. He tells them clear and loud that their abode will be hellfire. He can never forgive idolatry, which is the greatest crime. they will find no escape from the torments in hell, which is their journey's end. There will be an awakening of fire above them and a floor of fire underneath. They will not be able to drive it away from their faces nor from their backs. We are leaving out the blood-curdling accounts which abounding in the Quran about what the fire will do to the idolaters again and again and forever and ever. Finally, Allah bares his fangs and comes out in his true colors. Quote unquote, and how many generations, he thunders, we destroyed before them. Had they any place of refuge? And they cried out when it was no longer time for escape. Not one of them but denied the messenger, therefore my doom was justified. We seized them unawares and, lo, they were dumbfounded. So of the people who did wrong the last remnant was cut off. And the heavens and the earth wept not for them, nor were they reprieved. How many townships have we destroyed? As a raid by night or while they slept at noon, our terror came upon them. Have they not travelled in the land and seen the nature of the consequences for those who were before them, and they were mightier than these in power? Say unto them, O Muhammad, travel in the land and see the nature of the sequel for the guilty. And when we would destroy a township, we send commandments to its folk who live at ease, and afterwards they commit abomination therein, and so the word of doom hath effect for it, and we annihilate it with complete annihilation. There is not a township but we shall destroy it ere the day of resurrection, and punish it with dire punishment. And we verily have destroyed townships round about you. Allah struck at the foundations of their buildings, and then the roof fell down upon them from above them, and the doom came upon them whence they knew not. Are they who plan ill deeds then secure that Allah will not cause the earth to swallow them, or that He will not seize them in their going to and fro, so that there be no escape for them? So think not that Allah will fail to keep His promise to His messenger. Lo, Allah is mighty, able to requite. Lest the idolaters entertain the illusion that Allah is bragging and does not mean business, He names the tribes and towns He destroyed in the olden times. Nuh had warned his people repeatedly against idolatry, but they refused to denounce the quote-unquote gods of their forefathers. Allah sent heavy rains, waters rose on all sides, and they were drowned. Hud, a person called Hud, taught his people in Ad not to worship any gods beside Allah. They too were not prepared to give up the gods of their forefathers. Allah sent violent storms which raged for 7 nights and 8 days, and they were swept away. Salih was sent as a prophet to his people in Thamud. He invited them to worship Allah alone and throw away their idols. They did not listen to him. Instead, they hamstrung his camel. Allah caused an earthquake along with a great thunderclap in the sky, which turned their town upside down, and they were buried in the debris. Lut lived in Sodom when Allah's angels arrived to punish the inhabitants for their sinfulness. The Prophet advised them to repent and seek refuge in Allah. They turned a deaf ear and threatened to throw him out. Allah rained stones on them, and the town together with its people was destroyed. Shu'aib invited the people of Madayan or Midian to turn to Allah. Their chiefs invited him to renounce Islam. Allah's wrath caught up with them. Musa and Harun were sent to Firun or Pharaoh and showed him many signs from Allah. But Firun refused to become a believer and threatened to imprison the prophets. He was drowned in the sea along with his enemy, the Pharaoh. And that's why when you watch history channel documentaries today on Egypt and pharaohs and pyramids, they will tell you that we don't know where these people went. Just like they teach you in the history books of your school about Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, a lost people. You don't know where these people went. Although the descendants of pharaohs and the population, they just converted to Islam. They didn't disappear into thin air. The Harappans didn't disappear into thin air. They just shifted towards Gujarat and Rajasthan and in Rakhigari. But Firun, the pharaoh, refused to become a believer and threatened to imprison the prophets. He was drowned in the sea along with his army. The dwellers of Ar-Raz and folk of Tubba also denied the messengers whom Allah had sent to them. They were wiped out. Hindus will do well to read and interpret the Quran with the help of orthodox commentaries written by renowned Imams of Islam, rather than rely on the motivated and mischievous summaries written by Pandit Sundar Lal and Rahul Sankritayana, or on the silly commentaries penned by Dr. Bhagwan Das and Acharya Vinoba Bhave in the spirit of Sarvadharma Samabhava. Nothing can be more dangerous than a doctrine of terrorism which is either deliberately misrepresented or willfully misunderstood.